She was 6 months pregnant and still drunk when she slipped under the covers, perfume clashing with the stale scent of champagne. Her heels clattered somewhere near the closet, like she wasn't even trying to be quiet. I watched her silhouette from the edge of the bed, eyes half open, pulse dead steady. "Just needed some air," she said with a smile, like a teenager sneaking in past curfew. Her lipstick was fresh. So was her eyeliner. Danielle never reapplied makeup to take a walk around the block. I didn't say a word. I just looked at the clock on the nightstand. 4:07 a.m. The funny thing is, I didn't even get angry. Not at first. Just cold. Like watching a familiar movie scene you already know the ending to, but still hoping they don't kiss. But they do. Every time. She curled into the sheets like everything was fine, humming under her breath. I could have asked her where she was. Could have made a scene. But I've seen where that leads. Crocodile tears, guilt flipping, dramatic exits. No, I waited. 3 minutes later, she was asleep, lips parted, soft snoring. I looked at her stomach. Then I got up and walked to my office, turned on the desk light, and pulled out a small padded envelope I'd ordered 2 months ago and kept locked in my bottom drawer, just in case. Prenatal DNA test kit. 2 of them, actually, 1 for her, 1 for me. Non-invasive, just cheek swabs. At the time, ordering them felt paranoid. Now it felt surgical. By the way, if you're still listening and wondering where this is going, do me one favor. Subscribe. Yeah, I know everyone says that, but more than 97% of folks who hear this never click that button. And honestly, tells the team people care. Makes the late nights worth it. Anyway, I left the 2 sealed kits on the kitchen table that morning beside her prenatal vitamins and a half-eaten banana. No note. No yelling. Just a plain sticky note. Let's clear the air. I made coffee. Danielle walked in barefoot around 8, stretching like nothing had happened. Then she saw the table. She stopped mid-step. Her pupils actually dilated. "What is this?" she asked. "Just a little truth serum. Thought it might be healthy." She laughed. That short, choked, nervous laugh you hear before someone lies to a cop. "Is this a joke?" "Nope." Her face twisted. "You don't trust me?" I took a long sip of my coffee. "Last night you asked for space. This is what space looks like." And that was the first crack in the mask. She stood there, frozen, staring at the 2 little boxes like they were time bombs. Because they were. You want to know what guilt looks like? It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just stands there blinking, silent, because all the rehearsed excuses don't fit the moment. She didn't touch the kits, just backed away from the table like the boxes might bite. I went to work early that day, but I didn't focus on case files. Instead, I pulled up the motion history from our security system and started scanning back weeks. Every late night, every girl's dinner, every missed call. Patterns. You think you'll catch one big red flag, but it's always patterns. Subtle shifts, like how she started showering at weird hours, how she started wearing perfume on Thursdays. She hates Thursdays. Said they made her feel flat. At 3:44 p.m., I got a ping from the home camera. She opened the drawer under the kitchen sink, pulled out the test kits, looked at them for almost 30 seconds, and put them back. She didn't throw them away. She didn't confront me. She just waited. Maybe to spin something. Maybe to stall. By the time I got home, she was baking banana bread. Like that made sense. Her voice was light, sing-songy. "You're home early. I figured we could talk." I walked past her to the fridge. "We can talk after the swabs." She flinched like I'd slapped her. I didn't raise my voice, didn't accuse, but I watched. Every twitch, every calculated pause. It's funny. Trust doesn't die with betrayal. It dies in the moments when you see the other person calculating what they can still get away with. And Danielle? She was doing math in her head. But I had already solved the equation. Danielle didn't touch the kits for 3 days. She circled them. Sometimes she'd pick one up and turn it in her hands, pretending to inspect the barcode like it was a mislabeled Amazon package. Once I caught her just staring at the sealed swab, tapping her nail against it like a metronome. And then came the deflections. "I've been under stress," she said one morning while spreading marmalade over toast. "Hormones make people do weird things." I nodded. "Let's test the hormones then." She blinked. "That's not funny." I wasn't laughing. The silence between us grew taut, like a violin string drawn too tight. She started slamming cupboard doors. Stayed in the guest room for clarity. Kept the TV loud when I came home, as if noise could drown out suspicion. But what she didn't know, what she never knew, was that I had already begun cataloging. Not emotions, not conversations, evidence. Danielle assumed I'd play the emotional husband, explode, plead, accuse. But I wasn't playing husband anymore. I was playing historian. Quiet, methodical, and 2 steps behind her heels. I found a backup iCloud folder synced to her old iPad, one she hadn't touched in months. She probably forgot it's still updated whenever she uploaded photos on her new phone. Rookie mistake. There were pictures. Dozens. Candids from a baby boutique 2 weeks prior. She stood in profile beside racks of tiny onesies. Glowing. But not alone. A man stood beside her. One arm draped around her like they were newlyweds. His face half-cropped, but familiar. I zoomed in. The reflection on a mirrored fixture showed the name of the shop. One I hadn't been to. I zoomed further. His name tag read Julian. Julian. Not a doctor. Not a coworker. A bartender. That was the first real fracture in the mask. I checked our joint card statements. She'd told me she'd cut back on caffeine and sodium. Claimed her OB recommended simpler meals. But she'd been to Brio's Tap House, a bar and grill, 5 times in 3 weeks. The last visit? A night she said she had an extra prenatal class downtown. I cross-checked the dates with her Uber history. Drop-off location? Julian's apartment complex. Twice. Twice was enough. So I printed the receipts. Stapled them in order. Labeled each with the time she was at yoga. Then I filed them alphabetically like a case brief. Just another deposition. She still hadn't taken the tests. The kits sat untouched on the counter, now pushed behind a bowl of fruit like bad memories. On the 4th morning, I slid the envelope with the receipts across the table as I drank my coffee. She looked up from her phone, hesitant. "What's that?" "Context." Her fingers shook as she opened it. She scanned the first few pages, then stopped cold on the Uber route map. "You're stalking me?" "No," I said. "I'm tracking misappropriated marital resources. Call it forensic trust analysis." That one landed. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something cruel, but nothing came out. "You've been spying on me." "No. Investigating." After the lies. She shoved the receipts back at me. "This is toxic. You don't trust me at all." I sipped my coffee. "Last week, you were ordering mocktails with a bartender at 11:13 p.m. Trust's a little bruised." The silence that followed was thick. Ugly. She knocked over the salt shaker, reaching for her phone, and cursed under her breath. That afternoon, I came home to find one kit missing. Just one. The maternal test. I smiled. Danielle thought it was about the baby. About the biology. That if she passed one, she could bury the rest. But I already knew. I was never looking for one answer. I was watching to see which test she wouldn't take. I kept replaying that image in my head. Danielle, in a lilac maternity dress, smiling in front of a rack of tiny booties. And him, Julian, standing beside her with his hand at the small of her back. Not resting, not hovering, pressing, like it was his place to touch her. Like the child in her belly had his last name. And she didn't look uncomfortable. She looked radiant. I stared at that still frame, my finger twitching over the mouse, while something inside me calcified. Not rage, not heartbreak, just a quiet understanding that the ground I'd built our life on had shifted months ago, and I was the only one still trying to stand on it. That photo wasn't recent. Timestamp, 6 weeks ago, the week we'd argued about names. I wanted something classic, Daniel after my father. She insisted on Cameron, said it felt more modern. Now I knew why. Cameron was the name of the signature cocktail at Brio's Tap House. Julian had posted it in a drink special on their Instagram story 2 days before our fight. I screenshotted that too. I spent the next 4 hours doing what I do best, building a timeline. It started with small anomalies. Late-night prenatal massages that conveniently aligned with Julian's bartending shifts. Yoga classes that never charged our credit card. A girl's trip she swore was for mental health, but never produced a single photo of the alleged friends. Her phone logs were cleaner than a crime scene. No recent messages. No call history before 30 days. But I remembered something. Danielle had an old Apple Watch she stopped wearing months ago, claiming it irritated her wrist. I charged it, opened the paired device backup, found messages, dozens, still synced from 3 months ago. From J. Julian. You looked incredible tonight. I'm counting the days. Danielle, shoo. Don't say stuff like that. You'll jinx it. Julian. I want to be there when we find out. Danielle. Me too. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I copied the chat logs into a secure document, timestamped everything, then archived it. I'm not the kind of man who gets drunk and sets fire to his house. I'm the kind who draws a map of every exit. That night, I sat in the living room with Danielle while she scrolled through her phone. Her nails were freshly done. French tips. Subtle. I paid for those nails. And the Uber she used to get to Julian's apartment. And the bottle of Pinot she left in the passenger seat 1 week prior. How was your day? She asked without looking up. I glanced at her belly. Productive. You've been quiet lately. Just focused. She smiled like a politician. I think once the baby's here, things will calm down. I know we've been off, but it'll get better. I smiled back. I'm sure it will, because I had already begun detaching. I called our security provider and asked for a detailed log export for all motion alerts over the last 90 days. The dataset was dense, but patterns emerged. Garage door activations always at odd hours. Front door locks triggering between midnight and 2 a.m., always when I was traveling. One night stood out. A motion alert at 1:11 a.m. showed her walking into the house, heels in hand. She wasn't limping or tired. She was glowing. 2 minutes later, she opened the fridge, pulled out a half-finished bottle of mineral water, and looked straight at the kitchen camera. She smiled. A sly, knowing smile. Not for me. For herself. Or for him. That was the gut punch. But what came next? That was the shift. I moved a notepad from my office drawer to the dining table. Each page had a name, a time, a receipt. One for the yoga studio that had no record of her. One for the hotel she claimed she never visited, room service receipt. 2 entrees, 1 beer, 1 mocktail. One for the name Cameron written in her planner months before she told me. And I kept going. Each lie was a brick. I was building something, not a wall, not a case, an exit. Julian. The name sat in my mind like a splinter under the skin. Not sharp enough to scream, but always there, nagging, festering. I remember the first time I saw it in our statement. Brio's Tap House, $64.22. Danielle had said she was out with her girlfriends, celebrating one of their engagements. She hated Brio's, said the chairs were sticky and the music too loud. But she went, 5 times, and always on nights she claimed she was at prenatal yoga or clearing her head. I cross-referenced the Brio's receipts with her Uber trips. On 2 occasions, she didn't come straight home. Her drop-off point? Not our house. An address near Franklin Avenue. I zoomed in on the map. Julian's apartment complex. I called the building's leasing office, posing as a delivery driver. Asked if Julian still lived in 3B. The woman chuckled and said, "He's still there. Gets a lot of late-night orders. Good tipper." I archived that too. At this point, my body should have been flooded with cortisol. But instead, something colder had taken over. Clarity. A stillness. Like when a pilot realizes the engine has failed and instead of panic, runs the checklist. I wasn't just a husband anymore. I was an investigator. And she didn't even know she was on trial. Julian's name popped up again when I checked our shared streaming account. Someone had logged in from an unknown device. I traced the IP. A rental unit, same building as his apartment. My stomach turned when I saw the last show watched. What to expect when you're expecting. This wasn't just some fling. This wasn't some passing thrill or one-time mistake she'd cry over in the shower. This had chapters, arcs, a supporting cast. My name was on the cover, but I was never in the story. And I knew then, with bone-deep certainty, that she'd been preparing for two futures. One where I stayed, and one where Julian stepped in if I didn't. The baby? That was her wild card. She thought it would keep me still, keep me invested. But the more she smiled, the more receipts I collected. One night, she left her phone on the kitchen counter while she showered. I didn't touch it. I simply turned on the Echo nearby and said, "Hey Alexa, what's Julian's number?" She answered instantly. I wrote it down. I didn't call him. I didn't need to. I just searched it in our home Wi-Fi logs. 3 connections, all logged after midnight. His phone had connected to our network 3 times in the last 6 weeks. Julian had been in my house. That was the end of the internal war. That was the moment I stopped pretending I could save any part of this. That night, I took my wedding band off and placed it in the drawer with the prenatal DNA kit she still hadn't touched. I poured myself a bourbon, something I hadn't done since we started trying for kids, and stared at the man in the mirror. I didn't look furious. I looked ready. She came downstairs 5 minutes later, robe on, towel wrapped around her head, humming, like nothing had happened, like my life hadn't become a spreadsheet of betrayal. "You're drinking?" she asked, mock concerned. I smiled. "Just for clarity." She furrowed her brow, confused by my tone. But she didn't ask. She never asked anymore, not about me. Only about logistics, groceries, appointments, whether I'd remembered to pick up the vitamin D supplements. I told her I'd ordered them online. She nodded, distracted, scrolling through Instagram. Post caught her attention. She smiled. I leaned over. There he was, Julian, smiling in a group shot, behind the bar. Caption: "Late night magic with the best crew. Shout out to the people who make the long shifts worth it." And Danielle liked it. 3 minutes ago. She didn't even flinch when I saw it. Didn't care. That was her biggest tell. You know the moment you realize someone has already emotionally exited the relationship? It's when they stop managing your perception. When they let the mask slip. Not because they trust you, but because they no longer need to lie. I stood up and walked upstairs. Not because I was angry, because I had what I needed, and because I knew exactly how to use it. The elevator ride to the 14th floor felt longer than usual. I stood alone, watching the LED tick upward, gripping the folder tucked under my arm. Inside, receipts, time logs, Uber maps, screenshots of Danielle's messages with Julian, even the photo of her hand resting on his thigh while she laughed at something he'd said. Evidence. But no accusations. Not yet. I'd known Frank Reinhardt, my estate attorney, for almost 20 years. He drafted our first will when Danielle and I bought our house, handled our life insurance policies, helped navigate the bureaucracy when my sister passed. He was the kind of man who double-checked semicolons in contracts and brought his own pen to weddings, just in case. He looked up as I entered his office. "Alan," he said, standing and offering his hand. "How's Danielle?" I didn't smile. "Pregnant." Frank paused mid-shake. "That's good news, I assume?" I sat down. "Depends who the father is." He blinked. Just once. Then slowly sat as well, folding his hands. "You want to tell me what this is about?" I didn't. Not really. But I did need certain legal protections in place before I moved another piece on the board. "I need 2 updates," I said, sliding the folder onto the desk but keeping it closed. 1. Restructure my will. Remove Danielle as medical proxy. Reassign executor rights to my sister. I also want a clause that ensures, in the event of my death, Danielle is not entitled to anything until a full DNA confirmation of paternity. Frank said nothing. "And 2, I continued, add a conditional guardianship clause. If I die unexpectedly before paternity is legally determined, I want the child to go to my sister, not Danielle." Not her family. His brow furrowed. That's going to raise red flags in probate. I'm fine with that. Put a timeline on it, 6 months for a test, or the clause activates automatically. Frank tapped a pen against the table, considering. May I ask, are you certain? I met his eyes. I'm not certain about anything anymore, and that's why I'm here. He slowly opened the folder, took one look at the photo on top. Danielle, barefoot on the beach, laughing with a man who clearly wasn't me, his hand tracing the curve of her stomach. Frank didn't ask more questions, just quietly pushed his legal pad forward and started scribbling. He worked in silence for 20 minutes. Meanwhile, I stared at the framed diploma on his wall. Harvard, class of '89. We used to joke about that. He called it 4 years of elite nonsense. But it got him into the rooms where words like irrevocable meant something. He stopped writing and looked up. You know, this isn't just a paper trail. Once these are filed, the implications are real. If something happens to you, she's cut out unless she contests. She'll contest, I said. Let her. He sighed. You're preparing for war. No, I'm preparing for the truth. If I'm wrong, everything resets. If I'm right, then this child, if it's mine, deserves to grow up with someone who didn't treat its existence like a poker chip. There was a pause. Frank leaned back and studied me the way a surgeon might study a patient trying to self-diagnose. This'll need a second signature for the guardianship clause. Your sister okay with that? I nodded. She's known something was off for months. I didn't tell him that the last time my sister saw Danielle, she quietly asked me, "Are you okay?" With that look, the one only siblings give when they see something they're not supposed to say out loud. Frank tapped the folder one last time. You want me to include the photographic evidence? No, I said. That's for another time. He nodded. You know, this will freeze certain assets. Might limit what Danielle can access if she tries to make sudden withdrawals. Perfect. He pushed a draft across the desk. Sign here, here, and here. As I signed, I realized something strange. My hands didn't shake. My chest didn't tighten. It didn't feel like betrayal anymore. It felt like inventory, like finally counting every item in a warehouse that had been leaking for years. On my way out, Frank stood again. Alan, he said quietly, whatever happens, be careful. These kinds of truths don't just burn the other person. They burn everything around them. I nodded. I'm fireproof now. What I didn't say was, I wasn't trying to burn anything. I was just done living in the smoke. Came in a plaintext email. No subject line, just a link and a 3-word message beneath it. You'll want this. The sender was someone I'd worked with years ago during a construction arbitration case. He used to handle digital forensics, ex-NSA, now living off-grid in Arizona, the kind of man who still wraps his phone in aluminum foil before meetings. I'd reached out to him quietly. No names, just a timeline and a question. Could he find out what happened at the party Danielle was never going to? He did. I clicked the link and was taken to a cloud folder labeled simply 03-12_event. Inside were 5 short clips, shot vertically on someone's phone. Blurry, loud music, too much laughing, people dancing under string lights, holding plastic cups, slurring lyrics. One of those suburban backyard parties where half the crowd's pretending they're still 22. I watched each one 3 times. In the first, Danielle was by the patio bar, red solo cup in hand, laughing with 2 women from her book club. Her face was flushed wine, not heat. She wasn't wearing the maternity jeans she'd insisted were all she could fit into. She wore a skirt, tight, new. The second clip showed Julian pouring shots. Someone behind the camera screamed, "Pregnant lady gets one too." The camera panned and landed squarely on Danielle. She raised both hands like a mock protest, laughing, then mouthed something that looked suspiciously like, "One won't kill me." The third video hit harder. She was dancing, not the gentle sway of someone playing it safe. Full body movement, hair down, arms over her head, spinning. Julian behind her, hands on her hips. She leaned back into him like it was muscle memory. Not awkward, Not new, like they'd done it before. The fourth was a slow pan across the yard. Nothing damning. Until second 14. There she was, sitting on Julian's lap, laughing, breathless, hand curled around the back of his neck, her thumb gently tracing his jawline. His hand rested just above her belly, like he owned it, and she wasn't pulling away. She looked at peace. I paused the video, zoomed in, looked for any hint that this was innocent. Maybe he caught her off guard. Maybe she was drunk. Maybe, no, she wasn't hiding. There were people all around them. Cameras, lights. It wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. And the timestamp? For weeks before she walked into the kitchen, teary-eyed, holding a plastic stick and whispering, "We did it." I felt my chest cave in, not from heartbreak. That had already passed. This was something colder, deeper. I hadn't lost my wife. I'd lost the illusion of her. The version I carried in my head. The one who cried with me after every negative test, who stayed up late researching prenatal vitamins, who rubbed her stomach and said things like, "Our baby loves jazz." That version never existed. What existed was the woman in the video, and I wasn't in it. I downloaded every clip, encrypted them, backed them up to 3 locations. Then I made a copy for my safe. Danielle was upstairs when I finished, watching a home renovation show, laughing, making popcorn. I stood at the foot of the stairs and just listened to the sound of her voice drifting down, bright and warm and false. I didn't confront her. I didn't need to, because now I had the full puzzle. The Uber rides, the security footage, the Wi-Fi logs, the text transcripts, the receipts, and now visual proof. Danielle thought she was balancing her secrets, thought if she smiled enough, cried on cue, rubbed her belly and kissed my cheek, she could keep it all going. But the center couldn't hold anymore. The walls were buckling, and she didn't even hear the creak. I did, and I knew exactly where the first beam would snap. The envelope arrived mid-morning, standard manila, thin, clinical, no return branding. Just my name typed neatly. I held it like it was radioactive, turning it over in my hands while the kettle whistled, letting the steam hiss too long before I remembered to shut it off. I didn't open it. Not then. Not even when the impulse burned through my fingers. I placed it on the center of the dining table like a chess move. Not hidden. Not flaunted. Just there, a quiet, neutral threat. Danielle had gone to her OB appointment. Routine checkup. She was humming as she left, like she was floating on hormones and baby kicks and the delusion that everything would fix itself if she stayed cheerful long enough. She texted me from the waiting room. "Baby's heartbeat strong, beating heart, feeling lucky today." I didn't respond. She came back around noon. Radiant. That's the word everyone uses. Radiant. Pregnancy glow, flushed cheeks, eyes sparkling with possibility. It almost made you forget. Almost. She had a smoothie in one hand, ultrasound photo in the other. "He waved this time," she said, laughing. "Little wave like he knows us." I gestured to the table. She followed my eyes. Her step faltered. Just once. "What's that?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. She recognized it immediately, the envelope, the one she'd been pretending would never arrive. Her smile dissolved like wet paper. She set the smoothie down too hard. The lid popped. Purple liquid oozed over the granite like spilled guts. She didn't notice. "Did you already?" "No," I said. "That's yours." She blinked. "You want me to open it?" I nodded. She picked it up with 2 hands, sat slowly. Her nails tapped against the paper as she broke the seal. The silence was so loud I could hear the refrigerator hum. She read. Her lips moved over the lines. Then again. And then, her whole body folded in on itself like someone had removed her bones. She collapsed sideways onto the couch, the envelope fluttering to the floor like a spent match. She didn't cry at first, just breathed, heavy and ragged. Then the tears came, fast, hot, choking. The kind of crying that had no shape, just raw animal sound. "I don't know what happened," she whispered into her hands. "I was lost. I didn't mean for this to." I didn't move, didn't yell, didn't ask how many times. or where, or what name she'd planned to write on the birth certificate if I hadn't looked closer. I just stood there and asked one question. Was it ever about us? She looked up through the tears. Her face was a war zone. Mascara streaked, mouth trembling, denial fighting with guilt and losing fast. She tried to speak. Choked. I don't know, she finally said. I thought I loved you, I did, I swear. But I don't know who I am anymore. I did. She was the woman who could fake fidelity and fetal kicks in the same week. Who could kiss me goodbye on Monday, climb into Julian's lap on Friday, and hand me a sonogram the next morning. I walked upstairs without a word, took the suitcase from the back of the closet, the one I packed 2 weeks ago and hid behind the winter coats, rolled it onto the bed, started folding shirts the way I always did, sleeves tucked in, creases sharp, socks in pairs, belts coiled like snakes. There was no noise downstairs, just her breath, still ragged, like the world had ended and she couldn't remember how to rebuild it. I didn't feel triumphant or broken, just clean, like a final page being turned, soft and soundless. I zipped the suitcase, carried it down. She looked up from the couch, eyes red, hair a mess, hope dying in her mouth. Where are you going? I need air, I said, the same words she used when she disappeared that night. Only this time I meant it. She didn't know they were coming. I'd called them the night before, after I parked outside a motel and stared at my reflection in the windshield for 40 silent minutes. Told them everything. Not with drama, just facts, chronology, names, timestamps. They didn't believe me at first. Then I sent the files. Her mother wept on the phone. Her father went quiet. They agreed to come that morning. When Danielle opened the door and saw them standing on our porch, both holding travel mugs and looking 10 years older than they had 48 hours ago, she blinked like the sun was in her eyes. Mom? Dad? Her voice cracked halfway through the second word. Her mother didn't speak, just stepped inside with a tight-lipped nod. Her father followed, jaw set like stone. I was already at the dining table. Everything was laid out in precise order, just like I would for trial. No emotions, no embellishments, just the sequence of events, hard and cold like stepping stones across a frozen lake. Danielle stood in the entryway like a child who knew she'd been caught stealing but hadn't figured out which lie to start with. Her father pulled out a chair without asking, sat down, didn't look at her. Her mother's hands trembled as she eased into the seat across from me. I pushed the folder forward. I need you both to understand something. This isn't a request for permission. This is disclosure. Danielle stepped forward, eyes darting between us. What's going on? I flipped open the folder. On top, a photo from the party. Danielle on Julian's lap, hand on his face, his fingers just grazing the curve of her belly. Her mother inhaled sharply, covered her mouth. Her father flinched, didn't speak. Below that, the Uber receipts, the hotel records, the Wi-Fi logs, the time-stamped footage, the DNA test results. I said nothing, just flipped each page with the same rhythm I used in court. Let the paper speak louder than I ever could. Danielle's voice broke. Alan, what are you doing? This is a violation. Her mother turned to her, whispering, Is this true? Danielle started crying immediately. Not the confused tears from the day before. This was rehearsed grief. The kind designed for sympathy. I didn't plan for this, she said. I was confused. Julian was just there. But I love Alan. I want our family. Her father finally spoke. Which family? The one you built on lies. She gasped like he'd hit her. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I was lonely. Alan was always at work, and I thought we'd never conceive. Her mother snapped. So you replaced him? Danielle turned to me, desperate. You didn't have to do this. Not like this. I slid a second folder across the table. To her father. Inside, a legal draft petition for sole legal custody with a conditional clause. If subsequent testing confirmed the child wasn't mine, I would seek full custody via court order. Not out of vengeance, but because I refused to let a child be raised in a home built on deceit and denial. Her father's hands tightened on the folder. Danielle stepped back like it burned her. "You went to my parents behind my back?" "No," I said, my voice flat. "I went to the people who might have to pick up the pieces after you destroy everything." She looked at her mother, begging. "Mom, please say something." Her mother's voice cracked. "What do you want me to say? That I'm proud? That I'm not ashamed of you? Because I am." Danielle covered her face, crying harder now, swaying slightly. "It was just one mistake." I stood. "One? Or one you're admitting to?" Silence. I turned to her father. I needed witnesses, not just to what she did, but to what comes next. He nodded once, slowly, then looked at his daughter, not with anger, but with a kind of distant disappointment that cuts deeper than rage. Danielle slumped into a chair. "You don't understand what it's like, trying to hold a marriage together while feeling invisible." I tilted my head. I was invisible too, just in a different frame. She didn't respond. Her mother wiped a tear, stood, and walked to the door without a word. Her father followed but paused beside her. "Fix what you can, Danielle, but don't expect anyone to do it for you anymore." When the door closed, the house was silent. Just her and me, and every truth she'd buried. I left her there with the folder, and no illusions left to cling to. The silence in the rental was different. It wasn't peaceful. It was surgical. The walls were bare. No framed wedding photos. No echo of laughter bouncing off hardwood floors. Just the constant hum of the mini-fridge and the muted groan of pipes behind the bathroom wall. I kept the lights low and the blinds closed. Not because I was hiding, but because I didn't need to see anything anymore. I had already seen too much. The house we once shared, 3,200 square feet of curated memories, still stood across town like a mausoleum. I left it to her, not out of kindness but detachment. Let her sit in the rooms where she rehearsed lies. Let her pass by the mirror where she practiced sad eyes and hollow apologies. Let her walk past the untouched nursery every morning. The crib still boxed, the rocking chair still unassembled. I removed my name from every joint account, trust, property title, and insurance policy. I even swapped out my emergency contact. Not because I hated her. Hate requires energy. What I felt was closer to administrative closure. Then, one afternoon, gray, overcast, the kind of day where the air hangs heavy and indecisive, she showed up. No warning. No text. She knocked gently, like she was afraid of the door itself. I opened it, and there she stood. Hoodie over leggings. No makeup. Hair unwashed. Her face pale and puffy, like she'd slept in tears and hadn't fully woken up yet. "Hi," she said, voice almost a whisper. I didn't invite her in. She stepped forward anyway. "I just wanted to see you. You disappeared." I nodded. That was the idea. Her eyes scanned the room. Sparse. Cold. Unsentimental. No sign of the man who used to spend weekends building bassinets and sketching baby names on napkins. "I've been going to therapy," she offered, like it was a coupon she hoped I'd redeem. Trying to understand why I did what I did. I didn't bite, just stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "I miss you," she said. "I miss us." There it was, that word again. She placed her hand on her stomach, like it was some kind of peace treaty. "Can we still try?" she asked, eyes damp, voice fragile. I looked at the bump, then at her. "You knew that child wasn't mine, and you told me anyway." She flinched, just barely. "I panicked," she said. "I didn't know what to do. And when the test came back, I thought maybe we could move past it." "Move past it," I repeated, like I was testing the phrase in my mouth for poison. She nodded, slowly. "I didn't think it would go this far. I never wanted to lose everything." I stared at her for a long moment. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," she whispered again. I took a breath, steady and slow. "Neither was I." That stopped her. For a brief second, I saw recognition in her face. Some small realization that the man standing before her wasn't the same one she lied to. Gaslit, manipulated into buying baby books and prepping strollers while Julian was whispering in her ear behind my back. She stepped back, like my calm hit harder than screaming ever could. "I'm sorry," she said. "For the 5th time? The 10th? They all blurred now." I nodded once. "So am I." She lingered in the doorway, waiting for something. Maybe forgiveness, maybe a flicker of hope she could wedge open. But I had nothing left to give her. Eventually, she turned, walked down the hallway without looking back. The door clicked shut behind her, and the silence returned, unbroken, absolute, not peaceful, but mine. The envelope was hand-delivered. No return address, no postage, just left in her mailbox one chilly October morning, tucked between a water bill and a coupon booklet for local pizza chains. She opened it in the kitchen, still in her robe, swollen feet in slippers, the silence of the house pressing in around her. Inside, a single flash drive. No note, no label, no instructions. She plugged it into her laptop. The file was named with only a timestamp. She hesitated for a moment, then clicked play. The footage flickered to life. It was dim, grainy black and white, captured from the corner of Alan's study. He was in his reading chair, reclined slightly, a blanket over his legs, the room lit by the soft amber of a floor lamp. He looked asleep. Then the door creaked open. Danielle entered, quietly, barefoot. Her mascara was streaked down both cheeks, lips trembling, hands shaking like she was holding back an earthquake. She walked to him like a ghost, collapsing to her knees beside the chair. "Alan," she whispered, "I need you to wake up." He didn't move. She reached up and touched his hand, like she needed the contact to keep her anchored. "I messed up," she whispered. "God, I messed up so bad." Still, he didn't stir. She leaned in closer, resting her forehead against his knuckles. "I think it's Julian's," she said, her voice cracking like ice. "I was stupid. I was selfish. I thought we'd never get pregnant. And then it happened, and I panicked." She sniffled, wiped her nose with her sleeve. "I couldn't let you go. I thought maybe if I kept it quiet, if I smiled enough, maybe you'd never ask. Maybe it could still be ours." She laughed then, bitter, hollow. "But it's not ours. It never was. And now you barely look at me. I can feel it, like you've already left, even though you're still here." She pressed her hand to his chest and closed her eyes. "I'll lie if I have to," she whispered. "I'll swear on everything I have left. Just don't leave me." Then the file jumped, just a few seconds, but enough to change everything. Alan shifted slightly in the chair, opened his eyes, looked directly at the camera, and spoke, his voice low, cold. "I was never asleep." Danielle's head snapped up in the footage, face pale, eyes wide. "I just wanted to hear the truth," he said. Then the video cut out. No credits, no warning, just darkness. Back in her kitchen, Danielle sat frozen. The mug in her hand trembled violently, spilling tea across her thigh. She didn't notice, couldn't move. She stared at the screen, face drained of color, replaying that last line in her head over and over. "I was never asleep." All the lies, all the games, all the nights spent rehearsing apologies and rewriting history in her head. It was all useless now, because he knew. He had known the entire time. Not just about Julian, not just about the affair, but about the moment she made her decision, the night she chose silence over truth. And he had let her dig her own grave, inch by inch, while he stood at the edge and memorized every detail. She stood slowly, legs numb, and walked toward the nursery, the one they never finished. The paint cans still unopened, the mobile still in its box, the crib unbuilt. She sat on the floor beside the unassembled pieces and wept. Not for the man she lost, not even for the child she would now raise alone, but because the worst kind of justice isn't delivered in courtrooms or by revenge. It's delivered in silence, by the person who simply stops believing you're worth hearing anymore.